Welcome to the Young Bucks podcast. This will be number 106. My name's Henry Deering. My brother Chris is now down in Georgia, so today I'm flying solo. It's just me, but I think it's going to be good. I'm excited. He's gone, but as I'm recording this, the video, the farewell video, if you will be dropping. It's just a small clip, him explaining a little bit what's going on, just kind of funny, not really too serious, but you can go check that out. He's excited. He's going down to a camp for 12 weeks. He's going to be helping kids learn more about Jesus. He is on the travel team, so they're going to, I think, 3 different states, but overall it's like one new church each week. So I'm really excited for him. I'm pumped, proud of him, excited for him. I think it's going to be great. I think he's going to grow a lot, both as a person and in his relationship to God, and also be able to help other people know more about what they're doing, and build relationships with people that are his age, younger than him, older than him. So overall, I think it's really good. I think he's going to really grow a lot just in every capacity. And I'm excited for him to come back, share what he's got to say on the podcast. I don't think it's going to be possible to do an episode while he's gone, but it might be. It might be. We've talked about what it could possibly look like. He doesn't really have a lot of breaks, and because they actually take his phone throughout the week. And not that that's a bad thing. I think it's probably good and honestly probably really refreshing. He got his phone back yesterday for Sunday, so they give him back for the weekends. He's training right now. Trained last week. He's training this week, and then he's going to be off after that for 10 weeks of travel. But they come back to the camp, and he gets his phone back for the weekend, so I can talk to him then. So I'll be getting updates for him to be able to update you guys. But for the time being, what to expect could be some episodes that look like this, where it's just me talking. I'm going to have some people who I'm close to that have never been on the podcast come on, as well as episodes with Belle, my fiance, and Kyle. I didn't mean to make that sound like 3 people. Belle is my fiance, but my fiance, Belle, that would help. And Kyle. And who knows, maybe even Noah will come on. Spider-Man. I mean, what? No, but, that could kind of be what to expect. This won't be every single week because that might get boring. I don't know. But as I was working throughout this week, I was really thinking about this. I was really thinking about the podcast, and I was really excited about it. Sometimes I think with having 2 people, which is good. I mean, the reason I would say the vision for the podcast, or dream for the podcast, is something that I brought to Chris. So in one sense, it was my idea, but I would not just say this is my podcast and Chris does it with me. I think it's our podcast because that's what, I want from it. I don't want to just say this is mine and you're kind of a part of it, but no, it's both of ours. But I think, I kind of let that slip away in the sense of my overall part in the podcast, to the point where I just kind of ended up being a part of it to the bare minimum that I could be. And I think different seasons of life call for different levels of action and what you put to a certain thing. And so I really don't think that it's a bad thing. I think Chris and I are both growing, and we're at kind of this base level of life. Obviously, I've been out of high school a few years longer than he has. But at the same time, there's not this epic call for both of us. I mean, you can even see he's going down to Georgia. He's doing a camp. This podcast does not that wasn't something that was in the way of him doing that. And so there have been things in my life where it's kind of the same. It's not me going off to another state or being out of touch for a few weeks. But oh shoot. Okay. Thought I was going to call from Mom, but it looks like that went away. Anyways, so I kind of say that leading up to this point, where I in this 12-week absence of Chris, and am excited for how I can grow back into the podcast and really formulate what my original vision was. Because as a high schooler, I'll tell you, my vision for, I really wanted to have a podcast, probably for the last 5 or 6 years. The main thing I did for income during the summers was I mowed lawns. And, as I matured, I started with, rap music, probably some podcasts that I shouldn't listen to, or that I wouldn't listen to now. Let's put it that way. But now, like through that time, I eventually grew to a place where I was listening to podcasts that were both entertaining but also informative and really helped me learn how to be a better person. And that evolved into me really wanting to create content and to create a podcast. And that, like, so I started with this like really with this sense of joy about it. Like I was like, because before you do anything, all you're thinking about are the good and the feelings and like what this would look like. And I'll get into like something about like that kind of hits on that point again later. But as reality, like I started facing reality in life, it wasn't the same thing that I originally envisioned, which is okay. It's okay. But now I think I say all that to say with this opportunity to now, the podcast is really all on my shoulders because Chris is gone. And again, I'll reiterate it. I'm very excited for him. And I'm also excited for how I can grow in this podcast in relationship to you, in building the audience, in cultivating more of a better sense of content. It's something I'm excited for. Yesterday, before church, as I was eating my breakfast, I was scrolling YouTube. And I listened to this clip. Kirk Cousins is the quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons now. He just signed in the offseason. Biggest contract, I don't know if it's the biggest in NFL history, but he got a large contract, very guaranteed. And he wanted to go there because the team he was on was planning to draft a quarterback pretty high up. Quarterback's the position he plays. And ironically, the team that he signed to also drafted a quarterback very high, which the people who were interviewing him asked him about that. Like, what was your thought process? What were you thinking? And he gave a great answer. I won't go like all into it, and I can't really, I think he's great at interviews. He's someone who I think is like really good to look up to as an example. He's a believer. He's very outspoken about it, but he's also very like something I think can get lost in following Christ is how practical life is and how there are like realities, and even just how he talks about like wanting to compete and wanting to win as a football player. It's a very practical thing. But I think if you think about being a Christ follower, it's almost like you have to be a loser in every other category. And I don't say that like lightheartedly, but it's just a weird balance to think like, okay, if I want to win, but am I being prideful? So it's something that I think all believers probably face sometime or another. But being a younger believer, being a young person and also a young believer, someone who's really taken the accountability of like a personal relationship with God over the last like probably 2 years, that's been something that I've definitely struggled with, is like, well, how much do I want and how okay is it to want that? But anyways, Kirk was talking about how he was like, well, with a job or like a position, he's like, I've learned that you have to be a steward, not an owner of the thing that you do or the things that you have. He's like, my job is to like do what's in front of me well, and not necessarily to like take ownership or let that position own him. So kind of, he was just alluding to like the mindset that he was having and like how that was able to help him with not thinking in the wrong direction, because it could be justified. It could be like, man, I just got out, I requested out of this situation. Actually, no, he didn't get traded. He signed. So he's like, I chose to leave a situation where I knew what was going to happen. They were upfront with me. And I go to this other situation where they also were upfront with me. I can't remember if they said they were going to draft one or not, because he told a few stories. But anyways, when he signed, he was anticipating that they would not be selecting a quarterback high in the draft. So that could really mess somebody up. I mean, that'd be like if you went to work a job and like they promised you the most opportunity, and then they bring in a guy shortly after who's like, going to be training under you, but kind of like possibly receiving the same opportunity. Like, so just putting it in like a day-to-day life, like normal life to you and I, like that would be, because I do think sports can be fantasized. I mean, he's like, I don't know how big the contract was. Let's say it was $200 million. Like, that's not even a fathomable number. Like you can't even like think about what is 200 million. It's wild. But at the same time, even though all that money's involved, there's still like human characteristics. Like you're not gonna not think for yourself, even though you are making a lot of money. So I thought that was interesting because as someone who created this podcast and has been doing it, I would say the podcast has probably owned me more than excuse me, more than I've been a steward of it. I can't say that I've like taken the best care of this, what I would say vision God has given me, with this opportunity God has given me, to the level that I would expect of myself. And going back to what I said earlier, there's seasons of life. There's like efforts that you can put in. There's only so much time in a day or in a week where you can actually put into it. But I would say my thought behind what it is, what I'm bringing to the table, has not been the best it could be. I'm thankful for what has been, and I'm excited for what is to be and what I can do through this time period of stewarding the podcast for myself, stewarding the content, I would say, and the output. I'm very excited for what that can look like and become. So, man, I felt like there was something else to that I did not write down. But yeah, I think with the stewardship, you're taking care of something without having like this weird emotional attachment to it. Oh, that's what I was going to say. So like I was showing up to episodes, and I wouldn't say every episode, and I don't think it made it completely bad. I think things can still be good even if you're not putting in the effort that you know you could. They're just not as good as it could be. So with the podcast, it's like I'm showing up, but I'm not really being intentional. I'm not really coming prepared with what I want to say. I'm kind of reacting to the moment and just bringing to the moment what I have right then and there, rather than like, man, I used to think very deeply about like what I would want to share to people, what I would want to give. And now I'm just like letting that hold me back. I'm overthinking. I'm not giving what I could. And so if that makes sense, I'm looking to, be a steward in this and in all categories of life. So yeah, with that being said, the main thing I want to talk about today is 3 things that I have recently came to a conclusion about, that has been a lot of buildup in the past months, or even, well, I don't know how long, but just life happens and you see patterns, and eventually you think and you realize, okay, this is not, I was incorrect about this belief, or I was correct about this belief. So, for example, the first thing is that things don't just happen. You have to make them happen, which that might sound crazy, right? But I think, and I guess I should have prefaced with this. I can only speak to the things that I have experience with in my life, because that's something I struggle with. I'm like, well, there are people who have it way worse than me, that if they heard me talking, I would probably sound so arrogant. And then there's also people who have it way better than me, where it's like, I don't know, you could look down at, like, I don't really think about that one as much as I think about the other side of it, but I've realized I can only speak through my experience. So I'm going to talk to, either people who are kind of on the verge of exiting that high school season, maybe a young college student, someone who's just working, because that's kind of what these point back to, is like my stage of life. I'm 21 years old. I've been out of high school for 3 years. I've just been working. So like that's kind of where I'm coming from. Things don't just happen. You have to make them happen. In that season, or in that like life of a child and as a kid, things do just happen. Like there are things that you can go do. You can like make plans to hang out with friends. You can like choose to work on the sport or the music, like whatever extracurricular activity you have, you can choose to go do that. But there's so much that is like taken care of that it seems like things just happen, right? You wake up, you go to school, the schedule, your life is laid out until you're 18, right? You can like, even if you're a freshman, and this could even go to college too, if you want to say to 22, if you do decide to go to college for 4 years, your life is laid out. You could be like day 153 into your sophomore year of high school, and you know exactly what the next 2 years look like. But once you get out and like are in life, in outside of a structure that is like spelled out, it's hard to like see the end, or there's just more to work through. And also as a believer and someone who's trying to like pursue God, there's like a balance between God's will and my will. And okay, if I do want to go make it happen, am I going against God's will? And that's kind of what we were talking about before with the pride thing. Am I, and that will go down to point number 3 is pursuing Jesus on a personal level is extremely important. But sticking with this one, it's a balance between like dependency and action. And I think, again, different seasons call for different things. But like with this podcast, it's like, okay, we started it, but like, it's not just going to happen. Like we have to like do, and as I'm saying this, like, I feel like I sound stupid, but like, I hope this makes sense. You do have to be actionable. You have to like do things, but I think what I more so want to focus on is that they don't just happen. Like things don't just occur, but I say that because your entire life growing up, for the most part, they do. For the most part, they do. I know there's different situations or different circumstances, but for the most part, things just happen. And that's a very blessed thing to have. Like if you grew up that way, that's a way that I grew up. For the most part, things just happened. There's always, and there's going to be more, right? 'Cause I'm moving out soon from my childhood home. Food's not going to be in the pantry unless I go buy it. Food's not going to be in the fridge unless I go buy it. The floors aren't going to be clean unless I vacuum or sweep them, right? So there's like going to be another phase of life where like, like this is actually coming to me at a personal level for the first time. But I think more so in terms of work, in terms of being creative, taking steps is, I guess, let's just say like identity wise is I have a podcast. I'm a podcaster or a YouTuber because videos go up on YouTube. But it doesn't like just happen in the way like Mr. Beast. Everyone knows him. He's a YouTuber. But like you could also say that I'm a YouTuber. But there's a big difference. It's the action that defines the identity. I think that's what I'm trying to say, is that the actions that you take define the identity that you have, rather than like just existing in the realm in which you can have that identity. Yeah. Same thing with being a Christian. Like you can, like, I think the first year that I was out of high school, that like when I came to this revelation that was the opposite of what I'm talking about, is that I called myself a Christian, but I was just kind of allowing it to happen. There wasn't really anything actionable. And God brought me to the point where I realized I need to be more actionable. I need to like make it happen. I need to pursue this relationship with God for myself. And that's not, so I think overall that's my point. Maybe I should have worded it better, is that your identities don't define you as much as they do in the early stages of your life. So it's been cool to realize that, I would say. And I think for me, that point is overarching because as I grew into like those later years of high school and I was really thinking about what I wanted to do, and it was really on my mind and really a vision to create a podcast. It was really on my mind to do something in business, and eventually it became something in real estate. Is that imagination almost felt like I was accomplishing something, or like I was putting that out into like these years that I'm living now, is like, I'm going to accomplish that. And then I can sit here and reflect on that and be like, oh, I thought at this point in time, I would be doing more than I currently am. So I like kind of made a vision, but it was just kind of dependent on it happening. And when in reality there's more like intentionality that needs to take place. So I hope that makes sense. Like whatever area of life that you are in right now or claim to have, want to have, I guess sometimes things just need to be verbalized. Like just say it out loud. Something I pray often when like when I'm teaching or I'm speaking, even something like this is that like I just pray, God, the words that I don't think are very important, like just please allow me to say them faithfully, because there might be just one person out of the 20, 50, 100 people that hears it, but it really resonates with them, and that's the most impactful thing. So I try to think about that, even though that point can kind of seem silly. I hope something was beneficial there for you. And then the second point, which really goes along with that, is that things don't often feel the way you think they will. And I think kind of just the last thing I was talking about there is that vision that I was having, like, oh, when I'm 21, when I'm 22, this is what life's going to feel like. This is like what's going to be going on. But it's not a bad thing that things don't feel the way they do. Like in the beginning of this year, I sold the biggest house I've ever sold, which therefore would be the biggest check I've ever gotten from that. And it didn't really like feel like you just go to bed and wake up the same way you do before things happen. Now, of course, it's very cool to accomplish things. It's very necessary to accomplish things, because why would you do them if you didn't accomplish like some sort of purpose that you set out to do in it? But I think that speaks to how like meaningless things are, but more so in the terms of like how much we worry or have anxiety about things, is like we attach like so much more value to the things in like the wrong direction. Like I'm worried that this won't work out, but even if it did, it wouldn't feel the same way in the opposite way if it didn't work out. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I've had like clients where things don't work out. Like the first people I've ever shown a house to, I still haven't sold them a house. Like we still look every now and then. But those people, I started showing them houses after, and we found one before they did. So like it's interesting. Like, worrying about like, is this going to work out, or, which I would say, have I learned this? Yes. Am I perfectly practicing this? No. But do I think it's something that I'm going through that I can share to maybe someone who's like a few steps back in experience to what I have experienced? Like, I would think that would be a good thing to share. I'm reading through Ecclesiastes right now, and that is a book about how meaningless life is. Everything is toil, everything is vanity. But the book, it contrasts between that vanity and God giving meaning to everything. There's verses about, God, like God's purpose for man is to like enjoy life, enjoy his creation. But that's from a heart and from a perspective that like, this is God's, and I'm really excited because it's God's and God gave it to me. So I think like with that perspective, which can kind of seem silly sometimes, it's normalized to be worried. It's normalized to be anxious. But if you can be thankful and grateful during the times where it doesn't feel like you should be, I don't know. I hope that makes sense. So I just think like things don't feel the way you think they will, and that's not a bad thing. I think it's helpful when it comes to like having expectations of this like high feeling, like you're on a high from like something that just happened. And then it's not there, but it's because it was meaningless. But it's not meaningless in the sense of like there was absolutely no purpose to it. I think God gives that purpose to things. God gives that meaning to things. But from the perspective of like worrying about like a thing or a feeling, God, hold up. Sorry. Yeah, this is interesting. Like it's a person show and not have, and again, I'm talking to the camera, not necessarily talking to like Chris, like with the camera or whatnot. But like, speaking on a point and then someone being there to be able to like assist with it, um, it's interesting. But yeah, I think it's just very easy to attach more value to things than it's worth, and I think that can go in either direction. That can either be holding something too high up and something too low, where it's worry, it's anxiety, where if it's too high, it's pride, it's, I don't know. But for me, that's something that I definitely am working on. And I would say it's more so from like the worrying side. But I'm trying to not attach as much meaning to things. Ecclesiastes is really helping me out. And that kind of different perspectives. They could all be pastors, and I don't necessarily mean. Well, I guess this could even be included, like a mega church pastor is a stereotype. Like you could hear someone like that. You could hear someone who's like a Baptist. You could hear someone that's Catholic. You could hear someone, which you probably won't, but you could hear someone that is Presbyterian, Lutheran. Like there's so many different denominations, perspectives, non-denominational. And you could hear a slightly different answer. And if you're seeking, I think overall the purpose is Jesus, right? And you would hear that from most pastors. So like in the sense of like, is it right or wrong? It's probably right. But from a practical standpoint, from an application standpoint, when I hear different perspectives, I go in a whirlwind because I am open-minded enough to, by entertain, I don't mean believe, but I entertain everything from the perspective of, is this something worth believing? But I'm not quick to reject enough. I'm not quick enough to reject. I'm working on that speed in which I'm like, because I think as a believer, as someone who's like looking to learn, you don't want to reject things from someone who is coming from a standpoint of more experience and more perspective, preaching on God's word. It's like, whoa, if I hear, let's just use two for an example. If I hear one person talk about it this way and one person talk about it this way, I can't live out both, and not necessarily that I can't follow both, let's say. And I don't mean from a like doctrinally incorrect standpoint. I mean from a practical living standpoint. So then, if like, that's where I say personal relationship, and this is something I've had to work on recently. I've been absolutely terrible at this, and which is why I am very confused, and why I'm bringing this to the table today. Something that I've learned is that comes through prayer and actually reading and understanding the word. Because if I'm doing that on my personal level, then I am weighing my personal experience with it to the message that I'm hearing. And I'm like, okay, God, this is what I've learned through my time with you, and this is what I'm hearing right now from someone else. Like, this is either, this adds to the information and the experience I've had with you, rather than just learning from two different people, or, three, it can be however many. And so I think the personal level allows you to have a filter for the things that you take in, which is very important. It's very important to go to church. It's important to hear the word. The Bible says the word is spoken and the word is heard. So like, to learn and to grow, that has to happen. That has to take place. So yeah, and I'm reading Ecclesiastes again. It's interesting. It puts things in perspective. It allows you to see that life is meaningless, but in a good way, because God adds purpose to those things, and it's not bigger than it needs to be. All these points do kind of go together, I guess. But I would say that's been my biggest battle. It's been my biggest battle to the God's will thing. I think the best thing I ever heard about that is like he's not going to try to hide that from you. He's not going to have something for you to do and like try to hide it and keep it hidden. But I think he does want us to seek him. He definitely wants us to seek him and look for God. What opportunity do you have for me today? What opportunity do you have for me like this week? Something I'm still growing in. And this past week, I kind of pivoted back to like waking up, reading the Bible, to have that personal time with God so that I can refresh my mind to the point where I'm like, okay, this is what I believe for myself from God because I'm reading his word, I'm praying, just being refreshed. And refreshment also happens listening to a sermon while you're walking, working, listening to a podcast where someone's talking about the word. And yeah, I would say again, the point of the podcast is to share Chris and I's experience with things, not to teach from an authoritative perspective, but to speak what is being experienced for the listeners that are walking alongside of us. So I always want to make that clear. I can't be stated enough that I have zero intent or desire to like teach anybody because I know things. I have a desire to share my experiences, and I hope that comes out. Like I almost said I'm trying to be authentic. Sitting here, it is my goal to be authentic. Let's say that, and not come across like this is what I know, and you need to know it because I know it. Comment down below anything that you got, thoughts. Like if you have experienced any of these things, if it makes sense, if it resonates, if I'm completely wrong, there's that too. But yeah, I think it feels dumb saying it. I will be honest, but things don't just happen. You got to make them happen. Things don't often feel the way you think they will, and pursuing Jesus is extremely important on a personal level. Podcast is going to be good. We're going to keep growing and learning, sharing, and yeah. So thank you for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one.